In this video, why blood sugar control is so important when it comes to autoimmune disease. If you're a regular viewer of mine, you know that my son Nathan was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes earlier this year. And through the process of learning how to keep him alive and thriving, I have learned so much just about how blood sugar control is so important for anyone, but also really how it comes down in the context of autoimmune disease. I have read countless books and watched endless hours of doctors and researchers and clinicians and everybody all talking about blood sugar control and how it affects various parts of the body and just chronic disease and all of these different things. And so I kind of wanted to boil it down for you into something that hopefully you can understand, that really makes sense and will hit home about how important it is to look at your blood sugar and have it well controlled. I really think this information is extremely important, and it's the kind of thing that you should really pay attention to if you want to feel better from your autoimmune disease and to start to heal and to continue to feel better long term. Unfortunately, I don't think this is an option to ignore. I think it's one of those kind of key pillars in autoimmune wellness. So just join me as I go ahead and explain this.
Glucose, or sugar from carbohydrates, is the main source of energy for the body, at least for most people. There are other energy sources like ketones and our body's ability to extract glucose from proteins and other sources. But for the scope of this video, we're going to be focusing on glucose from carbohydrates, as that is what most people eat. Any sort of carbohydrate can be broken down into sugar. White sugar is obviously sugar, but even things like grains, sweet potatoes, or broccoli are all turned into glucose the body can use. The exact amount of sugar from a carb source varies. Like the amount of carbohydrate turned into glucose of whole grain bread, for example, is going to be a lot more than a cup of broccoli. But it all still looks like sugar in our bodies. Glucose provides energy for our cells. The organs, muscles, and nervous system all depend on it. So when we eat carbohydrates, the food gets broken down and glucose from the food enters the bloodstream through the small intestine. At this point, you can call the glucose blood sugar, which is the amount of glucose in the blood, ready to be used by the cells for energy. However, it's not like the cells can just suck up the sugar and use it. Think of the cells at this point like a house with a locked door. The blood sugar is right outside the door, but it can't get through without a key. The key is insulin. This hormone is produced by the pancreas, and its job is to unlock the door to the cells so they can use the glucose. And then if there is excess blood sugar after the cells get their fill, insulin can convert that blood sugar to glycogen, which is a form of storage for glucose in both the liver and your muscles. This is a good thing. If you're out and about and can't eat, your body can turn that glycogen back into glucose for energy. But there is only so much storage space for glycogen, and once that's filled, insulin will then shuttle the remaining blood sugar into fat cells for long-term storage. Again, if something happens and you can't eat for quite some time, this can be helpful, as once you've used up your glycogen stores from your liver and muscles, you'll be able to use the stores from fat for energy. This doesn't happen too often though in our modern day and age with food readily available. Instead, we keep flooding our bodies with excess glucose, and our bodies have to keep releasing insulin to address it. Unless you've been starved for a long time or are an athlete who works out a lot, it doesn't take much to fill up your energy stores. One meal or even a snack could do it, and that's only if you've depleted your glycogen stores. If you're eating on a regular basis and not working out a lot, this may not happen regularly. So when you continue to eat high carbohydrate meals, your pancreas will continue to send out a surge of insulin to address the glucose you eat. And because your cells don't need the energy, and your glucose storage doesn't need the energy, there's a ton of insulin in your bloodstream, and your blood sugar levels may drop too low. This is called reactive hypoglycemia, and can make you feel shaky, irritable, anxious, unfocused, hungry, craving sugars and carb-rich foods. You know, all of those things that word hangry, that's how you feel when you have reactive hypoglycemia. Then because you have low blood sugar, you feel the need to eat all the things. And this starts the process all over again. You eat a lot of carbs, raising your blood sugar, causing your body to have to send out another surge of insulin, which incidentally also makes you crave sugar, causing you to go low again, and over and over and over again. Now, this whole process can eventually lead to insulin resistance, where the body no longer responds to the insulin in the same way. It basically ignores the insulin. Kind of like if you were to sit near a busy road, at first you'd hear and may be bothered by the noise. But after a while, you probably wouldn't even notice it. When you keep flooding your body with excess amounts of insulin, the body just doesn't notice it. So the pancreas has to keep out pumping more and more and more insulin to help the cells to see it and to help unlock the glucose for energy. This in time can lead to type 2 diabetes, where the pancreas no longer can keep up with the amount of insulin needed to keep blood sugars in check and use the glucose for energy. And a quick aside, in case you were wondering, type 1 diabetes, like what my son Nathan has, is where the beta cells in the pancreas were attacked via an autoimmune disease, and therefore they can no longer produce insulin. So he has to take an outside source of insulin in order to unlock the glucose he eats for energy. Without this outside source of insulin, he would die. Back to what happens when you keep eating high carbohydrate meals. Yes, insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes are common problems from eating excess carbs and the resulting insulin surge. And neither of these things are good things. Not only will you gain weight, but it can cause a whole host of chronic health issues, including heart attacks, stroke, blindness, nerve damage, and has even been linked to cancer and Alzheimer's. This is all bad stuff. You don't want those. So that there should be enough reason to make sure that your blood sugar is under control. However, from an autoimmune disease standpoint, it's very important to pay attention to it well before it gets to that point. Remember how I said if you eat a high-carb meal, your blood sugar spikes, and then your pancreas floods your body with insulin, and then your blood sugars can drop quickly? Well, this is actually quite a big stressor on your body. You might be meditating all day long and feeling very zen and calm, but if your blood sugar levels are constantly fluctuating, your body sees this as a constant chronic stressor. When your blood sugars fluctuate wildly, your adrenal glands produce the stress hormone cortisol. This in turn can turn on the production of inflammatory proteins in the body, and then that can turn on a heightened immune response, which is exactly what you do not want when you're trying to calm your immune system down and stop it from attacking itself. Constant cortisol can also weaken the GI tract, making it more susceptible to inflammation, gut microbe imbalances, infection, and leaky gut. All of these things very detrimental from trying to feel better from an autoimmune disease and can be triggers within themselves. Now, if you have a thyroid-related autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's or Graves', chronic cortisol production is really bad news, as it can prevent the hormones from converting from T4 to the active form of T3 that the body can actually use. It can also prevent thyroid hormone from actually getting into cells by binding up the hormones before they can be used. And it prevents the body from getting rid of excess thyroid hormones, eventually causing thyroid hormone resistance. Sound familiar? Yep, just like insulin resistance. There definitely could be too much of a good thing when it comes to the body and hormones. These are some of the major reasons why even if you're taking a thyroid hormone, you still might have symptoms and or wildly fluctuating levels of thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. And if that weren't enough, there has even been evidence to show that insulin surges can cause autoimmune tissue destruction of the thyroid if you have Hashimoto's. Even if you don't have a thyroid-related autoimmune disease, you can even have thyroid issues from this, as the adrenal, thyroid, and pituitary glands become exhausted trying to keep up with all of this cortisol production. So even if you don't have Hashimoto's or Graves', you may wind up with hypothyroidism if blood sugar is left unchecked. In other words, you know that stress is bad for you, but stress from unstable blood sugar is one of those silent stressors that can really wreak havoc on your body. Now, continued high blood sugars can also cause all sorts of autoimmune disease problems as well. Just like low blood sugars, high blood sugars, or hyperglycemia can cause the same adrenal response, pumping out cortisol and all that goes with that. High blood sugar levels are also the leading cause of high testosterone in women, which can lead to things like polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, and an imbalance of estrogen, which can lead to all sorts of hormonal imbalance issues like heavy and irregular periods, anxiety, bloating, inability to fall or stay asleep, and depression. If you have Hashimoto's, these may sound familiar, but the symptoms may be exacerbated or even caused by these imbalances of these sex hormones rather than lack of thyroid hormones. It's all interconnected and complicated. One more interesting effect of chronic high blood sugar is leptin resistance. Leptin is yet another hormone that is produced in the fat cells of the body, and its job is to tell the brain when you've had enough to eat. When you have a lot of body fat, remember this is caused when insulin keeps shuttling excess glucose into fat cells for long-term storage, you produce a lot of leptin. You can also produce a lot when you overconsume food, or even during fasting and extreme calorie-restrictive dieting. And when you produce too much leptin, the leptin receptors in the brain will shut down and not hear the message that you're full and that you should stop eating. Sense a common theme here of your body ignoring too much of a hormone? There's definitely a delicate balance. I bring up leptin resistance because A, it may be a clue to why you might not be losing or gaining weight, and B, because leptin also appears to be essential in regulating the immune system. In fact, leptin resistance has been considered a trigger of several autoimmune diseases as well. And get this, leptin resistance has been shown to increase insulin secretion and further cause insulin resistance. And then high insulin amounts cause more leptin to be produced. It's a never-ending cycle of bad news for your body if you're trying to get or stay healthy. And finally, not all carbs fall under this, but sugar specifically, whether it's white sugar or any other form, it's all mainly empty calories. Typically, it has no or very little nutrients and can take the place of foods that will give you essential nutrients. And your immune system is a nutrient hog. If it's lacking in any nutrients, the regulatory aspects don't work well, letting autoimmunity run amok and destroying your organ tissues. So it is really important to make sure that when you take in calories, that they count.
Okay, phew. I know that was a lot. There are other reasons why blood sugar fluctuations and everything can be bad, but I feel like these are really the key main ideas of how they play with autoimmune disease and what you really should be aware of. Next week, I'll go over more about how to know if your blood sugar is unstable and fluctuating. But in the meantime, I just kind of want you to have a little bit of homework. Pay attention after the meals that you eat, especially the ones that have carbs in them. How do you feel? Do you feel kind of shaky? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel like you need to go and take a nap? Do you feel kind of hangry and irritable? And do you have cravings for sweets? Just pay attention to this. Maybe write it down like on your phone or on a sheet of paper or something and keep it with you so that way when you watch next week's video, you can identify on whether you're having any of these symptoms and maybe whether or not it's because you're high a lot of times or low or doing the whole entire blood sugar roller coaster kind of thing. So just pay attention to that throughout the week. And just so you know, in this particular series, I do plan on having at least 3 more videos. The next one about how to know if your blood sugar is unstable. Then the one after that is what to eat to keep your blood sugar stable and other things that you should do to kind of help stabilize your blood sugar. And then the last one is actually going to be about me. I've been wearing a continuous glucose monitor for the last several months. And so this measures my blood glucose at all times, 24/7. And it's been able to give me a lot of key insights about the things I've eaten and done, things like stress or having coffee and all of these different things. So I want to share the information I learned from that with you. So that will be in a few weeks. But next week, remember to join me for the one about how to know if your blood sugar is unstable. Thanks for joining me.